Welcome to Living in Harmony, a podcast for Christian parents who want to make the peace in their household without sacrificing their sanity. Here, we talk about everything from sibling rivalry to dating and how to raise your kids to be strong in their faith while maintaining your own. But don't worry, we're not all preachy here. That's the purpose of your church and your pastor. Here, we're here for you to help you know you are not alone in this crazy journey called parenthood. So whether you're a seasoned pro or a brand new parent, Living in Harmony, this is the podcast for you. So grab some coffee and join us as we navigate the ups and downs of raising kids in a Christian household where the gospel is the center. Well, welcome back to Living in Harmony. We hope you're having a good week wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Some of you are listening to this in your car. Some people listen to this while they go to sleep. Ooh, I know, right? You do not want to hear this voice when you're sleeping, unless you like nightmares. But anyways, my name's Delmar.
I'm Robert.
And I'm April.
And we're having a good time. Last week, if you were catched up with us last week, you know that we are taking a slight detour because we have some questions coming in. And I think these are some pretty good questions we've been given. And honestly, I was even telling y'all before today's, I was like, man, these are a little scaled up that we're going to go through today, but I think they're important. Hopefully we have collectively something to offer. But here's what I do know. We do have people who are listening who do have things to offer. So if you have any insight on what we're talking today, please let us know. We'd love to showcase that even on this podcast like we did Dan and Stephanie a couple weeks ago, which I thought was fantastic having them on, just being able to share their heart when it comes to students today and older Gen Z people going through depression and anxiety and stuff. So, but that being said, ready for the palate cleanse? First question. I'm going to read it, and then we're just going to volley it over to you. Ready? Here we go.
Oh boy. How
can I effectively communicate with my teenager when they seem distant or uninterested? You know the profile I'm talking about here, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Not necessarily like angry, but just
distant.
Distant.
And uninterested.
Yes.
I mean, this is going to sound, I think, overly simplified with what I'm about to say, but I would start if what you try to talk about with them doesn't seem to be connecting, go to what their interests are and connect with them that way. And at least you can start that way, just maybe build back together some community and interaction and communication. And, you know, the things that they are interested in, they're going to want to talk about, hopefully. And, you know, you can kind of show interest in that and get them to talk about that and branch off from there. You want to add anything?
No, I think that's good. And it kind of goes back to what we've talked about over the past, earlier in this season, where we've talked about humor and we've talked about some of the ways that our kids are probably different than us in maybe more than in previous generations, the difference between the generations. And so, yeah, that idea of going and finding that common place that you can talk to them, but it has to be genuine. I don't think you can pretend to show an interest in something. So you've got to find something. It's like, no, I'm really going to be curious about this thing. And probably the first time, not going to work, right? The first time you ask, it's going to be, oh my gosh, you don't mean that, right? But if you can show the interest over time and really, meet them where they are, because these are things that, if you think about it, it's not just something that's an interest to your kid. It's something that they are, it's a part of their life.
It's important to them.
It's important to them. And if you can show an interest in something that's important and talk about why that's important, and then do it without rolling your eyes and saying, oh my gosh, that's so dumb, until you get to a point like in a conversation we were having today where it's like, that's really dumb, but it's really funny, and we had a good time with it. You can, once you get there, but yeah, showing that genuine interest and being willing to, approach them where they are.
And I would just take all of that and say that would be, I think that's the best direct, not beating around the bush first approach. And that's the action I would take. I think one thing I would offer, just from the world of like living in student ministry for 20 years, I've seen the culture just completely change. And one thing I don't want to rule out, and this, I think this is more anecdotal right now, but I think as research happens, this is going to become proven more. But we are in a current generation, especially if you're like 16, 17 and under, where communication is not, verbal communication and interaction is just not on the forefront of their culture. And some of that has to do with them being locked down in a house for 2 years. I know students who they're already shy, but it's almost like this social subjugation they had for 2 years. It developmentally, things have happened in our culture.
Oh, yeah.
And we do not want to overlook that. I know I went to the school I graduated from just to hang out a while back, just to say hey to teachers and students. And one of the teachers pulled me aside and she goes, "I can't stand this." I'm like, "What?" She's like, "These students." I'm like, "Come on, lady, be nice." She's like, "No." She's like, "They don't know how to communicate." She's like, 20 years ago, like if you had a question, you would ask it. Today, we sit here. And even this week, I was texting a student, and their parents said, "Hey, would you reach out to my child?" "Absolutely. He likes to run." I said, "Okay." I said, "Hey, man." 7 hours later, "Hey." "Okay." I said, "It's Del." And I said, "It's Delmar." The next morning, "From church." No question mark, just "from church." I said, "Yeah."
That was a reply?
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know how many, maybe he knows other Delmars. I don't know. "From church." "Yes." And he said, then he didn't text back again the whole day. I said, "Hey, I just want to know if you want to go for a hike." Now, here's the thing. I'm not faulting him at all, because I genuinely, I think that he does want to go for a hike. I think he wants to hang out. He's a really great athlete. His family is a God-fearing family. But this is just a situation that we're in, I think, as a culture too. So one of the things I would just offer, if you're a parent and your child does not seem interested, number one, that doesn't mean they aren't. They may not know how to like reciprocate that, which then goes back to your point. You have to show them what it looks like to be interested.
That's what I was about to say is that I first of all agree with what you said, and I see that in the students I interact with, and the parents that I talk to, and I hear their stories every week, and there's a lot of truth to what you said there, and but even though that year or 2 years of isolation for a lot of these kids I think that has really shaped their ability or inability to communicate well, but we can teach them.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean that we say, well, this is the new normal. Like I don't embrace the new normal. For us, it's like, no, we can teach you what it's like to communicate well again. And it may not happen overnight, but they became, it kind of went into that direction, not necessarily overnight. And it might take a while to bring, kids back, but we can do it.
And I do agree with you. Like, since when are Christians called to embrace norm? What is mainstream normal?
So true. Yeah. And I think what you said there, April, that patience is required. And I hadn't thought about this until you said it. If it took 2 years to break them, it may take 2 years to fix them. And that might be 2 years of diligent working on it, not just 2 years of time. Right.
Yeah.
So as a parent, if
Definitely
you're saying,
working on it.
Yeah. So as a parent, if you're looking at something and saying, "Oh, well, I tried to ask a question about such and such music group or such and such a podcast or whatever, and it didn't work, and then I asked again the next week and it didn't work either." Well, that's a week. That's 2 weeks. Keep going.
Yeah.
Think about it as a
doesn't fix-
2-year project, and if you put that expectation on yourself from the beginning, this is going to take 18 months to 2 years to fix it. Then if it happens faster, which God willing it will, but then it's great, but you're not frustrated when it doesn't happen faster.
Every human breaks different.
True.
Like I know people who've been through trauma, and you wouldn't know it. It's like, wow, sanctification got in there and like bubbled up, uprooted the bitterness. But I also know there's people who've gone through the same trauma and it's been 10 years and it's still the defining thing. And I think we have to, if some of this is what's going on, we need to pray for our children and their sanctification. We pray for their mental health. That's one of the things we take very serious. But you're right. And to just piggyback off that 2 years thing, I stepped out of student ministry. In the month before COVID's came, I was out. That's when I stepped out of student ministry. And then I was out of student ministry for a little over 2 years, roughly. And then I stepped back into family ministry, which includes a large part students. And the first thought I had is, this is a shy group. No one wants to talk. And I thought, well, man, maybe it's just the church I'm at. And I talked to other youth pastors. No, our groups got shy too. And I think for me, it was the advantage of stepping out 2 years and stepping back in and being like, no talking. And then since then, I've been here about a year and a half. Now it's to the point where you walk in, people already having conversations, but it takes time. And not every student comes back the same way with the same strength. So we do need to practice that. And one of the things I would just encourage, because how can I effectively communicate when they seem distant or uninterested? My biggest encouragement is the verse, love is blind. Because I don't think that means that, I'm supposed to be willfully ignorant or whatever. But what it does mean is I'm going to assume the best about my child while they're not talking to me. Because if not, even as parents, we go to places, maybe my kid's harboring something or whatever. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do our homework and see if there's something going on with our child, but err on grace when it comes to your child. Err on grace. Even if they don't act like they like it, that doesn't mean they don't. That same student, he's super into Ninja Turtles. So we have a common thing.
Oh, wow.
So I took that student a year ago, a pack of unopened Ninja Turtle cards from 1990 when the movie came out. And I gave them to him. He's like, oh, and he just took them. I was like, okay, whatever. But later on, his sister came up to me. She goes, those are literally beside his bed, on his table. So meanwhile, I'm sitting here thinking, I guess failed attempt, but it's not always like that.
Right.
So how can
we don't always see it. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a great example of how something might make an impact that you don't immediately see, and sometimes we never see it.
Yeah, and speaking specifically to speaking to them and them not seeing it, so how can I effectively communicate? I think just striving to communicate is important, because they may not remember all of your awkward attempts as a parent, but they will remember if you don't try. Right. They will remember if you were distant. They will remember my parent gave up on me.
Right.
Some people listening have those feelings towards their own parents. So the biggest encouragement I think we give is just keep going. Trust that God's grace is sufficient, and realize that every teenager has been through something we have not, and that is that last space of life that was altogether ridiculous, and now they're trying to make sense of on the other side of it. So and some of it is even academic. Reading is down, math is down, science is down, language is down. Everything is down right now. So they also have this pressure to get back, and they're like, how do I get back when I missed 2 years?
Yeah.
So and that's stress on top of it, and then athletes someone felt like they lost opportunities. So there's just a lot of weird stuff that we never had to face. So hump a lot of grace in there.
Also, not only did we not have to face it at their age, but just something to keep in mind is that span of 2 years was a larger percentage of their lifetime so far compared to what that was in relation to us.
100%. Great point.
And it just a far larger chunk of their overall lifetime. So
because 2 years to a 12-year-old, that's 1/6 their life.
Yeah.
2 years to us is it's
a lot less than that.
That was just
Let's
annoying.
just say it's a lot. Yeah.
it was just annoying, right? Yes.
And we were all adults and were able to, for me, I was able to see what I thought of as ridiculous and over the top. I was able to see things for what they were.
Yeah.
A lot of these teenagers were being told things. And they were young and didn't have as much wisdom behind them yet. So.
And there's a lot more, just given what they went through. There's a lot more general cynicism in this culture too. Unfortunately, that may come out expressed to parents. They were lied to by authority figures, which made life really hard. And sometimes well-meaning parents get lumped into that, and it's awkward. So yes, effectively communicate. Just keep leaning into it. Now, I will say if there is rebellion mixed in with the distance and uninterested, that's a different concern. We've talked about that in other podcasts that we have. If you check our back catalog, we've talked about rebellious children and how to know how to navigate that and when it's even necessary to possibly go talk to someone else. But with just general communication, just keep pouring to it, because ultimately, and we're talking about this at church this Sunday. So it's funny this question came in, but in students, we're talking about using our words this Sunday. And one thing I'm going to be talking about is words are not the toilet. People, the toilet serves one purpose. It's a very utilitarian purpose. People think that's what words are. I need food. I want to go. But really, words are more like art, right? Words are more like a craft. Words are something that requires skill. So when you haven't been practicing that skill or craft and now you're being forced back into it, it's a tough thing. So there's a lot of value in that. So, for me, I try to do this with my children. Monday, I was going to meet with a client who I'm going to be doing some videography for. So I told my little girl, come on, we're going. She's about to be 3. And she went there and she sat with, this other girl who's about to get married, and was like the sweetest thing ever, But she was just eating her little cookie, listening. But it's like, put your children in situations, even if they're not social in them, they're social situations. You're getting them used to it, which is a great thing.
Oh, and that's a good point that we hadn't brought up yet, is the different ages. I was kind of thinking about teenagers. Well, the question was about teenagers, but
yes.
But if you have, younger children, they don't have to be broken like everybody else does. And you can bring a younger child along and say, okay, this is what healthy looks like. This is what good communication looks like. And it doesn't have to be a formal lesson. Things like that are awesome.
Just hanging out. There's a pastor, many of our listeners listen to him, Bodie Balcom. And when his children hit it's either 8th or 9th grade, the boys, he says, get your books, because they're with him. If he's in a meeting, they're in the meeting. If he's writing a sermon, they're in his office. And I just think that's a really, if you can do things like that, it does pull it in. So, okay, well, we got one more time. We got time enough for one more question. This one is probably going to eat our time too. Oh. So this one is, it came in, and let's just get to it. So it just said, I have a friend walking through a tough situation right now. So this friend's child was 11 years old, and she was a daughter, and she went to a friend's house. And while she was there, she was shown porn at the age of 11. And ever since then, they've been dealing with the after effects. Their daughter's now 14, and she expresses remorse and whatnot and understands that it's damaging, but it opened a door in her like an addiction. So, and she keeps wanting to find it. And we don't know how to deal with this. How do you deal with the issue of pornography in your children's lives? And also just wanting to shine a light. This is way more than just a male thing. Even if you look at stats, female porn is real high engagement. And I think the average time a child sees porn now, last I checked, was 9. So, which is crazy. But, I heard this quote this week. It's when you give your child a cell phone, you're not giving them the internet. You are giving the internet to them. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like you're handing them over to the internet.
You're giving them to the internet.
Yeah, you're giving them to the internet. And I think that's a very good quote, because it's like, it's not just, oh, here's this internet for me. No, you're now been handed over to it. So I don't know if y'all have ever experienced this with any of your children's friends or whatnot.
Well, I had a friend who went through a similar situation as that, and it was sad and difficult to hear some of her stories and walk through it. And it was I know for her it was something that had started innocently, because I think her daughter was watching like cartoons on YouTube, and then it sometimes was unattended, and then it just kind of click on different things. Oh, I don't know. I don't remember if it was like an autoplay thing or clicking on a different one and clicking your way into things that you shouldn't see. But she had a similar story of it awoke this addiction that they struggled with throughout. It continued for years, and when we talk about this kind of thing, there's going to be, parents who maybe you already have that situation with your kid that you're dealing with. And for some of you, maybe you're not at that point yet and you're trying to figure out, how can I protect my child? And I know one of the things that somebody said as recently as this week, I heard someone saying, it's not a matter of if your kid's going to get exposed to pornography, but it's a matter of when, because it's everywhere. And even if your kid is not like going and looking for it, especially, when our kids were younger, or when we were younger, nobody could pull out a cell phone really quick at school and say, hey, look at this and show it. And now they're in a situation where even if you're protecting their devices and you're protecting your family, other people have access and other people can in just a moment, show them things. And I honestly think I always go back to, you always want to look at, their heart and what sin does to our hearts. But also, I think we have to teach our kids about the harmful addiction aspect of it, because when they're little and teenagers and they don't, I think weren't you telling me once, you said something, I'm trying to remember what you said, but it was something like they don't even have all the abilities to make good decisions for the long term. And we put guardrails in place for so many things. And so I would say, don't be afraid to put guardrails in place. Even if you think, well, everybody else's parents let their kids do this or that, it doesn't mean you have to. So I have more I could say about it, but I also don't want to hog the time. So I know he probably wants to say some stuff too. So I'll come back in a minute.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is that, the research shows that young people, their brains are not able to process long-term consequences, right? As children, that's one of the reasons we restrict behavior and things like getting a tattoo, right? Is because they can't appropriately compute long-term consequences for short-term gain or against short-term gain, and sometimes that doesn't really settle in until early 20s, neurologically, and so that's something that we have to be aware of. And I think you look at this in two ways. One, guardrails, right? Just because it's everywhere doesn't mean you just shrug your shoulders and throw up your hands and abandon your kid to the world. You do everything you can to protect them, right? Protect the devices. Don't give them a smartphone. I mean, good grief. If only there was a thing that only made phone calls. Hey, look at that. We can do that still, right? If you feel like your kid needs a phone for to be able to make phone calls, get a phone that just makes phone calls, right? Phone and text.
I mean, or even like, when our kids were younger, and, maybe it's a little bit different these days, I don't know. But when our kids were getting their first iPhones, we parental locked everything, first of all. But we also took off certain apps. Like there was no Safari, there was no YouTube app, there was none of that. There was the phones. When we told them, your phone's primary purpose is for us to be able to communicate with you and for you to be able to communicate with us when you're off places and you might need something. And it's not for you to have as an entertainment device or to do these other things. And then we just slowly added things into it. But we restricted big time at first. And we actually received we didn't receive flack for it, but our kids did, even from some of their Christian friends, even from friends like at church that would make fun of them for not being able to get on Safari. And we even had conversations with our kids at one point, like, does it bother you when people say things like that? And I remember one of our kids had said, well, what bothers me is that, that we're being made fun of for not being able to do that. But then it's like, but I don't regret it because they knew they were being kept safe. And even now as adults, looking back, they have told us they don't regret any of that. They're like, we're thankful for every single bit of protection you put on us. I think
in the moment, they didn't like it. But, and they didn't like it because they were made fun of. They didn't like it because there were things they couldn't do and they felt left out. And that's real, right? It's very real to a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old, right? But yes, now all of our kids have thanked us for those protections.
And I think, practically speaking, it's a lot of students when they see porn for the first time, it's not even necessarily on their phone,
right?
It's on a computer, it's on nudity on Netflix, it's their friend's phone. So
yeah.
a couple things I would just, in addition to everything y'all said, is make it okay to discuss this issue in your house. If you
earlier than you think you need to.
Like if you waited late to have the sex talk, which late is what, 4th grade now, probably late. I think 8, 9 years, man. They kids are finding out. And when you have that talk, it's not mystified. It's not ooey gooey. It is, this is how it is, and God made it for a great reason. And you can even get into like, how sin messed it up and it really explain it. But when you could talk frank about this issue, that is really good, because then when porn comes into it, you've already have a foundation where you can be open. And when you have the talk with your child about sex, and if you already have, cool, go back and have it again. Have another variant of it. Hey, this is the teenager version of the one you got when you were 8. I mean, why not? And I would just put in there, make it safe for your children to tell you if they've watched porn. Because if you say, and if you ever do that, I'm going to beat your tail. What have you just done?
Yeah, they're never going to tell you.
Nope. They're going to develop an addiction.
If they don't tell you, if they don't feel like they can tell you, then if there's a problem, they don't have anywhere to go. And the problem's just going to get worse and worse. And maybe by the time you do find out something, it'll be full blown, and much, much more difficult to rein back in. And you have to let them know you always have like immunity, basically, like come talk to us and tell us if something like that happens, because we're here. And I think you also have to be able to tell your children and mean it. We want what's best for you. Yeah. No one else in this world wants what's best for you more than us as your parents. And so, you need to be able to come and talk to us, and we want you to be able to talk to us. And we want you to know that rules we put in place are not there to punish you. They're not there to ruin your day. They're not there to, they're there to protect you because we love you. And I think if you're able to honestly say those things to your kids, and I don't mean say it once and check the box that it's done. That's something that you might want to remind them about over and over throughout, just all the time, so that they know they love me, they want what's best for me, they trust me, and I can talk to them about this.
And I think in our world, it would be wonderful to think, oh, I've got these guardrails up, it'll protect my kids, but not going to. The guardrails are not perfect. They are going to see something, and it's going to be shown to them. And I think part of that openness is being able to have had an early conversation that says not if, but when somebody shows you something, when this pops up on your phone, when this pops up on your YouTube feed. And if you're letting them watch YouTube on their own, you shouldn't be. But, if this, when this happens to you, when something comes up in a class, happened to us in high school classes, right? When you are not, I'm sorry, I need to correct that. When they were in high school in taking dual enrollment college classes, we didn't have things just pop up in our homeschool classes. But when an assignment comes up and it's like, oh, here's a video that's not really appropriate, you need to be willing, have that so that they're comfortable coming to you as the parent and saying, hey, this thing happened to me, and maybe I was part of it, maybe I wasn't. Help me deal with this thing, right? And have that be a thing, just like we talk about, when you get pulled over for speeding, when how do you handle those? Same thing. We talk about first aid. We talk about things like that. So when that happens to you, here's how to handle it.
So first of all, I agree with everything you said, obviously, but well, I guess not obviously, but yes, obviously. But the other thing too is we need to. So yes, we need to have talks with them about when this stuff happens, come talk to us. But we also, you want to be able to have a plan in place and teach them what can you do when you're in, if you are somewhere and somebody, shows you something, or you're with friends and something, they start wanting to look at inappropriate stuff, or whatever the situation is, you need to have like an exit plan, an exit strategy, or at least here's what you can say to stop that, or to put like an instant guardrail in place for you. And that may be different for different families. So it's not like there's a one size fits all thing necessarily, but have proactively before even that comes up. Just like you talk to your kids about if if a stranger comes up and approaches you when you're walking home from school, what do you do? What will you say? If someone says, come get in my car. I mean, have the same conversations. What are you going to say? What can you do when someone wants to show you something like that? And that can help them, just being prepared and going, I know what I could do. I know what I should say. And you'd be surprised that, some kids will execute the plan.
Well, I would encourage you, when you're giving them their get out of porn card, that you want them to say or what you want them to do, don't think of it as this is some awkward thing. Think of it as a gift you are giving them. It's kind of like your children, first time they go driving, you cut the GPS on their phones, you got jumper cables in the car, you got a bottle of Fix-A-Flat in there. That stuff's in there. They never want to have to use it. But man, when their car's broken down at school and they need jumper cables, I'm so grateful for this gift. So, and I would spend some time like crafting what would you tell your child if they found themselves in that situation? Because if not, our default humanity has a tendency to just auto switch, and what ends up happening when your kid takes the cookies and eats them, they go and hide. And then when you say, hey, did you eat the cookies? No. And it's around their mouth. They by nature know what they did was wrong. So they try to hide. When most people, unless there's like some maybe abuse, when they see porn, they know it's wrong. So we have a tendency to react the same way. I'm going to go run, hide, shame, all those things. So giving them that gift of here's what you want to do when you see it. You come tell mom and dad. You've just you've deflated that balloon of hiding. Because yes, this was not appropriate to see, but you did the right thing. And even if your child has sought it out and found it, but they still came and told you, you did the right thing by coming and telling them. Right. So,
and one more thing, don't fall for the lie that says if you've got this in your past, if you've struggled with this as a parent, as an adult, as in your own past, that disqualifies you from setting guardrails, that disqualifies you from helping your children to avoid it. There are a lot of us who have exposure to, addiction to, that we have porn in our past. That does not mean that you have to give your kid a pass. It's like or be a hypocrite. That means that you can look at it and say, no, that was damaging to me. That's something that happened, that I did. And this is not just for this topic, but that was damaging to me. That's something I want to save you from and protect you from. And yeah, you can call me a hypocrite if you want, but it's not just because I did it before doesn't mean I think it's a good thing and doesn't mean I'm doing it again.
I mean, just like speeding or anything, like if you've ever, gotten a speeding ticket, that doesn't mean that you're going to tell your 16-year-old, oh, well, I got pulled over once,
drive however you want.
So I guess you can just speed. None of us would think that makes sense. So with this or any other topic, you still...
Very similar.
Yeah.
So, well, hey, this was heavy, but it's necessary because parenting sometimes is heavy. So, well, that being said, we do hope that you send us in some more. In the future, we'll probably do another question episode because we even have a few more sitting right here, which in the future we'll get around to. But that being said, we hope that today, whatever you're doing, whether you need to have a conversation with your child or whether you need to have a conversation with the Lord about a conversation you need to have with your child, we hope that you're living in harmony. My name is Delmar.
I'm Robert.
And I'm April.